Wow. Wow, wow, wow. The Mets just continue to keep us on our toes throughout the entire offseason, throughout the entirety of spring training. And after about, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 18 years of the Mets being attached to JD Martinez, they have finally signed him to a 1 year, $12 million contract with deferred payments. We'll get into all of the details here. Let's just roll the intro. We'll get this thing going. I'm joined by Rode once again. And let's get this thing started. The Mets have signed JD Martinez. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into everything that is going down right now, make sure to hit the like button if you have not already. Subscribe if you are new. Put on post notifications. We've got 30 days of 30 projections winding down this week. If you guys have not catch that yet, video on our channel every single day. And of course, the podcast every single Tuesday, premiering at 4 p.m. Eastern on that day. Now, as for the Mets, they have signed JD Martinez to a 1 year, $12 million contract, and you have some deferred payments as well from 2034 to 2038, to be honest. That rolling off your tongue, that does not even sound like a real year, so I really could give less of a shit. And he will be getting $4.5 million this year, I believe. So, Road, what are your thoughts about this off the top of your head? And we'll continue it from there.
Well, first off, I just want to say I feel bad for Mark Vientos because it seemed like, he was really poised to try to make a hold on this DH position, which we haven't been able to get any production out of since the universal DH was officially imposed in 2022. But I'm going to be honest, man, I'm kind of relieved. I feel so much more comfortable with this lineup with JD Martinez in it. And it's not a shot at Mark Vientos. It's really not. But, in a year where we have pretty much the highest payroll in baseball, where we're talking about being a fringe playoff team, with teams like the Giants and Padres improving, it's just like, I don't know. I just feel a lot more comfortable with a bat like JD Martinez in our lineup, who would have had 40 home runs in 113 games if he played all his games at Citi Field last year, more than Dodger Stadium. And that's a generalization. There's home and road games, but Citi Field is a great, great park for him. He's getting up there in age, which is obvious. I wonder what we're going to do with Vientos if we trade him, if we stick him in AAA. For example, the top of a lineup that's, Nimmo, Lindor, Alonso, Martinez, and Alvarez, as opposed to Nimmo, Lindor, Alonso, McNeil, Alvarez, having Martinez in there. And then Vientos, was usually going to be stacked at the bottom in a lot of these lineups I saw. It's just a much scarier lineup. And finally, just some power. We need some power. And if it doesn't work out as $4.5 million this year, it's not going to take any toll on our payroll long term. And JD Martinez was absolutely unbelievable last year. He had the best home run pace of his career, and especially in, the day and age of baseball where we are right now, you just need power. And the Mets have needed to do a move like this for so long. And I hope Mark Vientos figures it out somewhere. If it's not here, I really hope he can figure it out somewhere else. I really do think he has potential to be a really good power bat. But, it's just not the time for that. Our payroll is too high. Our fans, like us, we want to see this team win. And compared to a lot of other rosters in the NL, I think the Mets would have fallen a little bit short if they didn't take this, which I think is a little bit of a risk because you are going to bench some young players. And he is an older player. I just feel a lot more comfortable. I'm kind of relieved, to be honest. We just needed power, and I feel a lot safer about the power protection with this signing for sure.
Yeah, I think that when you look at it from the Mets' perspective, it just pretty much gets them over a lineup hump, shall we say, because more than half of the lineup is now guaranteed to be somewhat competent, and I think that that's something that we've really needed. Obviously they had some of the role players kind of mix in or whatever in 2022, but we only really had a few competitive hitters that were made to actually hit in the postseason. As for JD Martinez, something that I think that the Mets just really needed to address, basically the main goal that has been for about 5 years, which nobody is really, for some reason, the Mets have chose to ignore it for so long. They needed to protect Pete Alonso. And for some reason, they just thought that they could get away with plugging in these little pieces, the Vogelbachs, the Darren Ruffs. JD Davis had a good year in the juice balls. Dominic Smith showed promise 3 years ago. Let's see what he can do. And it seemed like at this point, you have to look at it. Enough is enough. Get a legitimate power bat. And I'm all for it. I am for it, of him coming in here. And again, like I've said, I've been neutral this entire time. I don't care if they rock with Vientos. I don't care if they platoon Vientos with DJ Stewart or whatever, even though I don't think that's the best way for Vientos to compete. Or they bring in a Jorge Soler, or they bring in a Jock Peterson, or they bring in a JD Martinez. Give me somebody that can install fear into the hearts of the pitcher after Pete Alonso. Because I think since the beginning of time, we all know that with Alonso in this lineup, it doesn't even make sense. Without any power protection, it doesn't even make sense to pitch to him. Like, why would you even pitch to Alonso? And that's the problem. And now he's probably going to get more pitches into the zone. And look at that. Maybe we have a big chance for 50, maybe even 60 home runs. Just with one move.
I mean, respectfully, Jeff McNeil, the rumblings of maybe him batting behind Pete, to respect him as a player, I think he's a solid player and all. In this day and age, I do not think he can be. I don't see a good reason for him to hit behind Pete Alonso. I just can't.
Yeah, it can't happen.
It's just the lineup is so much deeper and better now. With real power threats 1 through 5. You have 1 through 5, you have a lineup that could be Nimmo could give you 30, Lindor could give you 30, Pete can give you 50, JD Martinez could give you 40, Alvarez can give you 35. That sounds so much better. And that is just it. I'm really trying to respect Mark Vientos, but I think, I kind of was evolving on this issue of, do we sign a JD Martinez or not? Now, I was all on the Soler train, but I realized, once he won a multi-year deal, that wasn't happening. I didn't think it was going to happen, and it didn't. But, I think Mark Vientos, my stance has always been, if Mark Vientos gets consistent playing time, let's say he gets, if Mark Vientos gets 600 plate appearances or so, I am very confident in his ability to hit over 30 home runs. What I'm not personally confident in is for his ability to have a good WRC plus or a good OPS with those 30 home runs. I think he tends to be a streaky hitter at times, and he can be very inconsistent. And, there's hitters who hit bombs but aren't really that productive. And, while there is a lot of value to home runs, there is kind of a balance from teams that do well in the postseason of, the WRC plus can't be below average. You have to be a productive hitter at the same time.
I think that always has been a concern for those, is that that you're getting major league power, but you don't know if you're getting major league production, which I think is something that has always been the hit or miss with Vientos as to his hitting profile, where there's a lot of swing and miss. There's a lot of chasing. The pitch selection can be inconsistent with him, and I think that that's something that is very well aware. And again, is it possible that it could get better? Absolutely. But I think that at this point, it's really hard to say, well, this is our last year with Pete Alonso. Possibly. Could it be? Because, again, I think that they'll work out the deal. I think Pete Alonso is going to be here long term. This is our only full guaranteed year without Alonso. Let's protect him. And that's what they did. And that's what they did with this move. They said that Mark Vientos, even though he has shown strides a little bit in spring, he has shown some signs of being a possible power threat, leading the team in home runs in spring training, if that stat matters to you. But at the end of the day, we already know what we've seen from Mark Vientos this spring. It's probably not good enough. And even though I would love to see Mark Vientos succeed, really, really hard to see him doing that here with the types of expectations, the wait and see type of mentality. Now, again, the problem is I just don't want to see Mark Vientos in AAA, and that's what stings, because I don't need to see a 25-year-old just rotting away in AAA, which stinks because again, I understand everybody sees Mark Vientos. He's not hitting well. Get rid of him. Just trade him out of here. But at the end of the day, he is still a player with upside. He's still young. He still does have that power potential. And I don't want to see the Mets waste an asset like that. And that I think is something that they do need to think about. And I think a lot of Mets fans also have to think about, especially with how David Stearns has kind of looked at this of, given the rope for the young players to play. And I don't know what's going to go on there, because even though Beatty hasn't been the best in spring training, he's shown better results as compared to what he was last year. I'm feeling a little bit more confident as compared to I was last year right now from what I've seen in spring so far. And we'll talk about that on the podcast later this week. But the thing about Vientos is that I don't know if there's much of a battle there at third base, because it's really hard to see him as a major league third baseman. It really is. And by the way, for those in the chat, we could have, and I don't know, there's a potential, there's a strong possibility that we do have another guest coming on here in a few minutes. So just hold tight and you'll get another guest in here. But that's all I'll really say. But anyways, there you go.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, especially the standpoint. It wouldn't feel morally right to just put Mark Vientos in AAA. Like it really just, something feels wrong about it.
I'm taking care of that this week. Don't worry, it'll be taken care of. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I just think it just doesn't sound right in my head. It just doesn't feel good, to have Mark Vientos back in AAA when he has had no chance of the major leagues, and he was the best hitter in AAA last year. A lot of these quadruple A players have had extended looks in the majors. Mark Vientos hasn't. And I was encouraged by what Vientos showed at the end of last year. But man, look, there is still, in my mind, you can make an argument there's still a third baseman battle at this point. It might even ramp up now, because look,
Joey Wendell, exactly.
But with Mark Vientos, as much as I know a lot of people are high on Brett Beatty, I know he's made strides this spring. You can't take it at face value until you see him do it in the season. And Vientos has shown his power as well. And look, both are, from what we know, below average third baseman defensively. Both of them have been just lack of a better word, atrocious at the major league level. At least we've seen Vientos for a good month consistently put up power. And in half the games, he had the same amount of homers as Beatty.
Yeah.
And is there it might sound wrong to put Vientos in AAA, but if it could, he will not be happy there. You have to think of it that way. But from a team roster construction perspective, this is a third baseman option who is young. So I'm not sure. I have no clue what to do with Mark Vientos. You can maybe explore Beatty in the outfield again, like we have before, if Marte is struggling, if Bader needs some days off because, he's injury prone. Nimmo needs some days off. He has been injury prone in the past. Marte is injury prone. They did try Vientos in the outfield in the minors, and it did not work out. A while ago, they tried it.
I think as much as I am very frustrated with what I've seen from Marte so far, Vientos in right field is something I don't think I want to see. I don't think I want to see that. Um, like, there's not really much. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and again, listen, John is, and this is one of the co-hosts for Till Mets Do Us Part. Great podcast, by the way. He says that Vientos should go to AAA and play third base there every single day. If Beatty falters, the Mets don't have a third base. And again, I think that that's something that you do need to consider as well, because Beatty, as much as he has, seemed to have, I don't want to say turned a corner this spring, but like he showed more power promise. He has showed more competitive offensive game. You still don't know. Like, there still is a possibility, because let's not forget, when Beatty came up here last year, at the beginning of the year, he was red hot. I mean, he was red hot. We all know the batting average people loved him at the beginning. They loved that guy. Then all of a sudden, May comes around, June starts to falter. Escobar gets traded. It looks like he's going to continue to get the job for the rest of the year. He doesn't run away with it. So, I mean, I don't know what the deal is there. I think that overall, as a player, you're probably going to give the first licks to Beatty at third base. But in terms of just, I don't know, if you want to put that bat in the lineup, again, there is Francisco Lindor right next to the third baseman who can back them up. So that's another thought with Vientos or Beatty putting them at third base. But it's hard with a guy like JD Martinez on this roster now, and saying maybe both of these guys should be on the opening day roster, because it's hard to see it that way now.
Yeah, man. Can you roll up Explosives reply? I think it was above John's, because this is one I want to highlight. About 2025. Yeah, this one. This is, I think this is very accurate. I'm not sure Mark Vientos would have been our long-term DH, even if he made good strides this year. Like I said, I'm just not sure he can be the type of DH that, you plug into your every season lineup. I think he's the potential to provide you over 30 home runs. But like I said, I'm not sure that he can be a productive, consistent bat at this level. Come 2025, I think Ryan Clifford's a better DH option long-term, more ideal. There's going to be free agents, and there's always going to be the trade market. Tony.
Yeah, we've got an alum in here, so
That's actually
show some respect. Tony Metro's in the house. We just stole a Dodger. The Mets just stole a Dodger, so he's all hyped up right now. So, but welcome back, Tony. It's been a while. How do you feel? Firsthand, Mets signed JD Martinez after 6 years of being attached to this man.
Well, thank you for the welcome back. It feels great to be back. Love always poaching from the Dodgers. I was really happy with this news. It came as a bit of a surprise. It's been dragged out for months now, and even you could go back years. The Mets have always had some type of connection to JD Martinez, but we finally got a DH, and it's funny because I heard you guys talking about it before, but since the universal DH was implemented, that first year, I guess it was 22. The Mets were supposedly supposed to be poised as one of the teams to benefit from it the most, when we thought that JD Davis and Dom Smith were going to be integral. And ever since, it's never panned out. This is probably now the best pure power bat that Pete Alonso has ever had hitting behind him since he debuted in the majors, going back to 2019. So I'm really excited, not only for what JD brings himself, but for what he will do for this lineup, specifically Pete. I think it takes a lot of pressure off two guys specifically, that being number one, Francisco Alvarez. He doesn't need to be that number 5 guy necessarily. That's got to, drive runners in if they're not pitching to Pete. He doesn't have to. He can develop at the pace he has been, which I've been very pleased with. And number two, Starling Marte, who obviously has been horrific this spring, and barely having played last year, coming off the double groin surgery the offseason before. You just hope you get something out of him, but now it just knocks everyone in the lineup down one in the pecking order. Just like if you signed a top reliever, it's a little less pressure on everyone in the lineup. So really happy with the signing.
Yeah, I see it as the fact that with JD Martinez there, kind of getting them over the hump, you have five, maybe four, but five at their best competitive MLB hitters, if you include Alvarez into that conversation. And then I probably would not mind as much if in that top five you have somebody like McNeil on there at maybe one point, or Marte, which I don't even want to see anywhere close to the top of the lineup, but I'm fine with them switching those in and out now because the Mets lineup gets a little bit deeper and it has actual protection behind Pete Alonso. Do I want it to be completely designated? I like as JD Martinez being our designated hitter, he should be just the designated hitter, add an acronym behind Alonso. Like he should just be behind Alonso the whole time. I think they should. I think in 162 games, because we all know that there's a good chance that Pete Alonso does play 162 games, JD Martinez should be batting behind him no matter what. And if not, it obviously should be Alvarez. But again, it just makes it a lot deeper. And then you can also put one of these players that piss me off in the top of the lineup, and it makes it just a little bit deeper because then you go down to the 6 hole. I mean, the bottom 3, I'm still expecting on the typical day for it to be death row. I am expecting that. I think that even though Beatty has shown something a little bit during spring, Bader has been okay during spring so far. Marte is Marte, but I think that the bottom of the lineup now, it makes me a little bit less nervous. That's how I kind of look at it.
Mm-hmm. And if there's something else I'd like to highlight, last year, JD Martinez showed an ability to hit any pitch type. That didn't sustain in 2022, but, there was a lot of circumstances with his back, which is, I was quite surprised actually by how JD Martinez was last year. I don't know if I mentioned this, but, he would have had 39 home runs at Citi Field last year in 113 games. And, as bad as I feel for Vientos, and, I just think this is a move you had to make. You got teams in the NL getting better, and, you want to take a look at our young players, but there's so many more young players we can play as well. Like Beatty, and, Vientos doesn't have to go. Like Christian Scott will be up, Vassell will be up. I'm sure Hamill will be up. McGill is going to get a big run. Budo, there's more young guys you can play, and I'm sure Acuna will be up at some point. And man, I bring this up every time, but if Ronnie Mauricio did not get hurt, the power potential of this lineup this could have been a really good team. And it could be, look, we don't know how. I'm not sure how this team is going to play. I kind of projected them for around 82 wins. I think there's a scenario where they go above that. I think there's a scenario they go below it. But with a guy like Ronnie Mauricio, that, he would not have been blocked by a move like this, really, because he wasn't really a DH possibility either. And he would have just been, for me, the most intriguing young player to see.
He could have been protected at the bottom of the lineup. That's the thing. He would be able to go through those growing pains as going into the major leagues. I think if he was batting 7th or batting 8th or something like that, if he gets hot, you bring him in the top of the lineup to protect whatever. But probably would have been a good situation bringing in a guy like JD Martinez, making that a little bit deeper. But at the end of the day, you look at it now.
The great news is it's a really no risk signing. I mean, you bring him in, you hope that the Mets are playing good ball up and through June, July, and going into the trade deadline. And if they're not, then you hope that JD was hitting well and you could flip him for something. It probably won't be a whole lot unless he's just mashing the cover off the ball. But there's no harm, no foul. It's not like another team is going to have to absorb his contract for next year. So again, you have the potential to maximize the return on prospects, but in perfect world, he's hitting fifth or clean up on some days, and the Mets are winning ball games, and they're potentially adding more guys at the deadline. So there's no risk to it, in my opinion. The only risk is if he's going to fall off a cliff, like we see with most aging star players that come to the Mets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there's no like just like every single other one of these, every single one of these signings that they've made this offseason, whether you think they're at whatever tier they're at, they have made these 1-year deals, these short-term deals where they really are just not in a tough space at any point. If JD Martinez, let's say, in case of him, if he plays like shit, he's gone next year. He plays well and the team's winning, you can add at the deadline because you have more flexibility now that he's making like $4.5 million. And they said like, what do they have? Like 10 to 15 million set aside for the trade deadline, something like that. And if the Mets aren't doing well, JD Martinez is hitting, you can trade him. I mean, they have so many different outlets they can look at it with, so many of these guys on this roster. And then at the end, next year, I mean, look at the Mets books. It's like, what, 160 million on the payroll? You got so much room. I mean, they can't go wrong here. Now, will it stink that maybe the potential of a wasted season in 2024? Maybe, but in the current situation that they're in, I think that this is the best thing. Okay. Don't forget, David Peterson does return in May, because that is one of the game changers.
That is underrated, I feel like, though. David Peterson is starting pitching depth at the very worst,
no, it makes
right?
it makes it deeper. Like, listen, I think that if you need an arm out there, David Peterson is an arm. But as compared to some of the internal options that we do have, I'd much rather see what we have in Vassell, who I think that at best he's a 5. I think that at this current moment, I'm still calling up Jose Budo over the potential of David Peterson coming up here if he's healthy. I'm still looking to see what I have in Vassell, and that's even before I get to the pitching prospects such as Scott Hamill or whatever. It's looking at that because I don't know. I think that and then you also have Senga coming in because he'll be our trade deadline acquisition.
Do you guys what do you think about the rotation? Do you think we add at this point?
No, they're not adding. I mean, the only thing out there really is obviously Montgomery. They're not doing anything beyond a 1-year deal unless it was golden child 25-year-old like Yamamoto. They're not gonna tie themselves down to long-term contracts unless it is an just absolute perfect situation. And as good as I think Montgomery is, and I think he'll continue to ascend, he doesn't fit their current timeline. And I know they're saying, next year, hopefully they're competing and, hopefully it'd be a 2-3 year deal for Montgomery where he'd be a part of a rotation. But we got to see how this year plays out. There are a lot of question marks. They could compete. I have them pegged at 83 wins, but they're not going to tie themselves up for the future. Like Carson said, a lot of money coming off the books, a lot of flexibility next year, a lot of prospects right now that are ready to bubble and come to the big leagues. I don't think they're going to tie themselves up for next year.
I also I agree with you. I know I saw a lot of comments in this comment section saying, Montgomery next. While I think Montgomery would be like, if you add Montgomery to this rotation, it's a better rotation. I mean, no one can disagree with that. But at the same time, like, I personally don't see Montgomery's upside as high as everyone else. I don't think he's an ace. I think he's a 2-3 border. Like, he's a middle to high end guy, if that makes sense. Like, I personally don't think he's nearly as good as Blake Snell. for the price tag he's seeking, and the amount of money we'd actually be paying this year, I'm not sure, there's a lot of young pitchers that I really want to see. I really want to see Christian Scott pitch. I'm not sure how much of an upside pick, that would be, or how much better that move would make us with all the extra money you'd be paying.
I think the best way to weigh out the negatives or the positives of Jordan Montgomery in the current market that he's in. Let's say the Mets do need another arm. Let's say you want to add another arm to this rotation. I'll ask the chat this as well. Are you giving Montgomery in the same ballpark as what Carlos Rodon just got last year?
Personally, absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you look at. Are you giving him that?
No disrespect either.
Yeah.
I just don't think he has that. The season Rodon came off of was an ace number one caliber season. He came off 2 of those. Montgomery, in my eyes, while his ERA might have been inching among, that kind of caliber, he's never been that his whole career. And his stuff doesn't blow off the page. He went on an incredible run in the postseason. He was the anchor of that pitching staff in that World Series run. But it would be a really questionable signing at the amount of years, at the tax, at the level pitcher he's really shown himself to be, which is a very good pitcher. It doesn't make sense for the short term or the long term to me. And I get the aspect of we have one pitcher in a rotation next year, Senga, he is getting a bit older. He does have some elbow issues from his physical with the Mets. That's one thing we know. So from that aspect, I get it. But, if we were to get Montgomery, it'd be a shorter term deal, which this just doesn't really fit in our timeline to me. I would have loved a Michael Lorenzen, actually. $4 million bucks
to the Rangers, I think.
Yeah. At $4 million bucks, that would have been a fine move to get more starting pitching depth, because you can never have too much. I would have done that.
I think the way David Stearns wants to do this is going to be similar to how he built it in Milwaukee. And I think that every team is going to start adopting moving forward. We've seen how important bullpens are now, more so than ever. Starters are going 4, 5, 6 innings, 4 or 5 innings in playoff games for the most part. I mean, their pitch counts are so high by the 5th, 6th inning. It's like the value is actually now gone toward relief pitching. Like, I would rather spend my money on high-end relievers and try to develop starting pitching and keep them cheap. And then when they get to free agency, by the time they're 28, 29, you don't want to pay for what they did. You want to pay for what they're going to do. So I think this is the way to go about it now moving forward in baseball. Relievers win games. I mean, starting pitching, you can have aces and horses at the top of your rotation. It doesn't matter because of all the analytics and all the high pitch counts, it seems, in this era of baseball. They're only going 5, 6 innings anyway. It's the bullpen that you got to have. So I think Stearns wants to develop the pitching. He wants to see what Christian Scott's got and the other guys, and just take it from there and hopefully hit on this upcoming draft and international signings, and hopefully build it from within in the rotation.
Yeah, in terms of the pitching, I think when you look at the young pitching, I think that it speaks volumes as compared to everybody in that spring breakout game who did pitch. Christian Scott did not pitch, and he pitched this late into spring training yesterday. It was against the Cardinals or something. They gave him 4 innings. It says a lot. I think that does say a lot, that they're like, okay, this man, at one point, if we have one injury, he's one phone call away. Now, I do think that they do give a chance to Budo. They still have Senga coming back. There are still spots that can be filled in before you bring up Christian Scott. But I think that does say a lot in terms of just one, in terms of Christian Scott. I mean, Dominic Hamill got roughed up today, but just when you look at him in the level that he is and the tier that he's in, I think that they do value him a lot, and they see him as a future piece to this rotation. Obviously, he needs to grab it, and obviously he needs to prove that. But again, I mean, they do have some faith into these young arms, and I'm okay with them doing that. If this is the year that they want to do that, go ahead and do that. But, and Steve Cohen said it himself. I mean, what was it a few days ago? He said, "I'm glad that we've seen the young pitching excel in the spotlight that they've gotten so far in this spring because pitching is freaking expensive." It's true. Pitching is so goddamn expensive. So if you can have a young, controllable starter with he's healthy, he gives you 6 innings every single night. That has a lot of value to an organization. It fills in a hole that you do not need to address at all in free agency or on the trade market at all. And I think that's what they want to examine here this year. And I'm okay with them doing that because there is promise there. Of course, I'm not happy about plugging in prospects, but again, if this is the way they want to evaluate it, go ahead and evaluate it. We see other teams bring up these prospects from the minor leagues. Sometimes they do well. Sometimes they do okay. Sometimes they don't do well. They get sent right back down, and they have some quantity they can fill into that. But, after seeing the Braves bring up just some random guys and they're just automatically gods for like a 2-month stretch for some reason, I think that you could do that eventually if you want to do that. And I think that that's something that they do keep in mind, obviously, with the quantity approach they have in the bullpen where there's not really the sexy names. The rotation where there's not really sexy names, but there's quality that has a ceiling and has upside. And that's how I look at the rotation. But yeah, I think that the pitching staff is what it is right now. And I think they're just waiting on, the update with Senga, who seems to be progressing well, which is good. I don't want to rush him, obviously. But I'm glad that right now Senga has been progressing very well as compared to the nightmare that we usually have to deal with our top arms.
Yeah. Tony,
sorry, what's up?
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I'm looking at the 2020 free agent starting pitchers, and this is, I really think, a trend that's gone back for years now as far as I don't want to pay starting pitchers anymore, okay? I want to develop them. They are way overpaid for barely doing anything at this point. The games are won by relievers, but Garrett Cole obviously has lived up to his contract. He's the most reliable pitcher in baseball up until this injury this offseason. Steven Strasburg, that's kind of a different case, obviously. He always had those injuries from a young age and went out and won them that World Series. They pushed him to relieve in that Game 7. Okay. Zach Wheeler, he turned out okay, but then you have like Madison Bumgarner. He was only 30 when he signed that $85 million deal with Arizona. Completely busted. Hyun-Jin Ryu, same thing. 32 years old, $80 million with Toronto. Fell off the face of the earth. Dallas Keuchel didn't sign until I don't know, I think it was later in the that might have actually been the year before with the Braves. Okay, but he signed with Chicago for 18.5 for $55 million over 3 years. Again, 31 years old. You have to develop your starting pitching from within the system. Keep them when they're cheap. That's it. I mean,
that's the max. It is.
Free agent contracts with starting pitchers rarely work out. Rarely.
I see, what Eduardo Rodriguez got earlier in the offseason. I'm not doing that. I ain't doing that. What was it, 3 or 4 years or whatever?
4 years, 80 million, I think.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. Get the yeah, he's a fine pitcher, but I'm not doing that. Come on. It's the term that bothers me, obviously, with Steve Cohen at the helm, of course, because the AAV, it's whatever. The luxury tax is the luxury tax, but the term, I'm not giving 4 hard years to that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
can I just say,
what happened with Scherzer and Verlander? Exactly. Thank you,
I agree.
Frank.
I agree, Frank. But no, Carson, I agree with you. I just want to say that, I think Christian Scott has to be up in the majors by this summer. I don't really
be surprised if it's earlier than you think. I wouldn't be surprised.
I just feel like this guy, I try my best not to overstep prospects. I am a Mets fan. There is a Mets bias. But Christian Scott genuinely, I think, has front.
Double-A last year.
He was the best starting pitcher in the minor leagues last year. He has real frontline upside. His command is unbelievable. And he's been getting a lot of, I feel like, Aaron Nola comps because of their release point and vertical approach and that kind of stuff. But Christian Scott's stuff is better than Aaron Nola's. And they both have impeccable command. Like Christian Scott, I have to think is going to be, if we make the playoffs, Christian Scott's going to be in that rotation. I have to think he is, right? I mean,
yeah, if they, I mean, going back to his start yesterday, the way he was using the arm side was disgusting. Like the way that he was just bleeding in these like the way that he was locating these fastballs. I mean, it will make a hitter so uncomfortable. And you even had like, what was it, Nick Gordon, you had other guys talking about him yesterday, and they're like, does this guy have a Cy Young? Is this guy like, they're talking about this guy being a frontline pitcher who hasn't even pitched a single inning in the major leagues yet. So there's definitely promise there, and I want to see it here. I think that he's going to be, a really key contributor out of all of our pitching prospects. But we'll see what they do, because at the start of the season, we're obviously not going to see any of the prospects, but the pitching staff has its upside, I think, from everybody in here, as compared to, I don't know, maybe the lowest upside you do. It's probably like Hauser. I don't know. Like Hauser's Hauser.
Yeah, I mean, look, going into today before this Martinez signing, I was not very excited about this season, mainly because of the rotation, but also, like I've said since I got in the show here, like I don't think the rotation is all that important, given that these guys don't go that deep into games. You need to just have a strong bullpen. You need to hit with power and
And they
put
have
runs
depth
up
in
on the
there. They
board.
really do. They have depth in
So
that bullpen.
all you have to hope for is that you can get 25 starts out of Senga. Maybe he misses the first month. It's a good news he's starting to throw again, hopefully this upcoming week. And then the rest of those guys just to be average MLB pitchers. Maybe one of
Sorry to
them I would.
interrupt you here, Tony, but
Yeah, I saw that. That's
yeah, that ain't
so
happening.
depressing. So
Yeah.
depressing. But just to have one guy pop off from those other four, and my guess is it would probably be Luis Severino of any of them. I think Jose Quintana is going to be your steady Eddie as long as he stays healthy, along with hopefully those 25 starts from Senga. And if Severino comes around and pitches like a 2 or a 3, I mean, there's no reason you can't do what the Diamondbacks did last year. There's no reason you can't, rip off 87, 88 wins, maybe make an acquisition at the deadline and get some contributions from the farm, from some of these guys ready to come up and surprise a lot of people.
And I think that you also have to take into account Mets leading spring training in ERA. So not forget that. Okay, well, listen, it's not pre-recorded. We're live here, but we're talking about the Mets, all right? But Christian Scott's nice. You have to admit that. I'm sure you saw that yesterday. Let's be real for a second.
All right,
if
so
you
real
want to
quick,
talk about JD Martinez, we can talk about JD Martinez.
I'll go
We can
back
get
to
back to
JD. I'll go back to him for a second, and then I'm actually
Yeah.
going to excuse myself. First off, I got to say this to Frank. No, you're not dreaming. This is real. I am here. I'm not logged into YouTube right now, so I can't reply to his comments. But anyway, I'm not expecting 30, 35 home runs from JD Martinez. I know he did 33 last year, 103, 135 weighted runs created. I got this horrible, PTSD with stars coming to the Mets and just falling off the cliff. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but can we get 25 home runs, 90 RBIs, somewhere around that area? And again, just giving that protection to Pete, extending the lineup, taking a little pressure off of Francisco Alvarez, off of Starling Marte, and whatever fans' expectations are for him at this point. 25 home runs, 85 to 90 RBIs. That would be totally satisfactory to me, and finally getting a DH for the Mets.
Yeah,
Tony,
I mean,
what are your thoughts again? Because obviously you weren't here for this conversation, but again, Andy Martino did tell us that the Mets kind of prefer JD Davis because of his defense over JD Martinez. Now, listen, first of all, What defense? So do you think that they made the right decision here? Let me just ask you
100.
that.
100%. They chose the right JD, no doubt. I mean, when they were flirting with JD Davis there, I was ready to rip my hair out and cancel
Yeah,
my
I was
MLB
actually
TV
done.
subscription. I mean, are you kidding me? It was, and it doesn't make sense because JD Martinez doesn't have the draft pick compensation attached to him. It was purely money. And if it came on a 1-year deal, we're not going to cry poverty for Steve Cohen for having to pay the luxury tax. I'm sorry. We're not going to cry poverty for a billionaire. So it made perfect sense, all the sense in the world for them to get JD Martinez. And obviously, Stearns was waiting until Martinez came to his price, and he did. And it's looking like the Mets are going to be beneficiaries of being patient now.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it is just I'm just so much more comfortable. It like, I know like comforting the fans isn't something you necessarily should do, but I have to think that, like we've been hearing from Martino that if the price became too good to pass, the Mets would have done this. And this is a player that fits so well at our park as well. And it was incredible last season. It's real power protection for Pete. That's just what it is. And
Yeah.
I'm just excited. And I do feel bad for Vientos. I really do. But, I agree with it. I think Jon said it before. Like put him in AAA, third base every single day. Yeah, as awful as that sounds, as boring and just like annoying as it sounds, like that would be the smart thing because Ronnie Mauricio's hurt.
League TV. I have the minor league.tv. I'll be watching. Don't worry. So he'll still have my viewership, but in Syracuse. But I don't know. It does stink. It really does stink when you think about it because there was a lot of talk about Vientos this offseason and how he had so much to prove and that they were going to give him the reins to be the DH. But, there is just some components about him that are just a little bit off. Like, I love the hitting profile of him. I think that if you do give him the chance, if he does get the full reins, eventually he'll figure it out because of the bat speed he does have, because of the raw power that he does have. And the fact that, even though the chasing can be a little inconsistent, the pitch recognition has gotten better throughout his journey through the minor leagues into the major leagues. But at this current moment, I think at this current position of how it's been with Pete Alonso kind of carrying this offense, I think that they needed a little bit more from Vientos this spring. And even though Stearns has said, I don't really focus on the spring stats or the spring results, there's been a few performances from Vientos where he has not looked like a major league hitter whatsoever this spring. And we can honestly say that. There's been some there he has and some that he hasn't. You need that kind of consistency from a DH where their main job is to hit.
Also, like he was approaching near a 600 slugging last year. Like this was a no-brainer at a good price. It sucks to bench the young guy in Vientos. It's going to suck if he's in AAA.
Or maybe JDM starts in AAA. Who knows?
Or maybe he's the bench bat, because you don't want to have Vientos not play, because
just like JD Davis, our bench bat.
Well, I would not have been opposed to JD Davis. I would not have been opposed to JD Davis, and I'm being completely serious about that. I said this in the stream last time in last episode. It didn't get into the episode. I watched it. But for all of you who are wondering, like maybe having JD Davis, like having both of them probably would have been better than having one of them. I mean, right? Because look, if Beatty sucks, if Beatty struggles, JD Davis is an average third baseman you could put out there. Like, and he's going to be an average third baseman. Like, we were yelling for Gio Urshela or Carson. I know you were. You're like, oh, Gio Urshela would be a great fit. Like, I think JD has more offensive upside than Gio Urshela. I know it's recycling the same shit. I know it doesn't always work out. But, like, it would have made sense. I understand why Stearns liked the fit. And I like the fit for those same reasons. I wasn't heartbroken in the slides when it didn't happen. But, with the injury to Ronnie Mauricio, once again, like, you have two guys who there's a decent chance both Vientos and Beatty are really underperform and perform to nearly the same underperformances last year. You got to have someone, a safer option in organization in case something happens, you know? That's why I would have been, that's why I would not have been totally opposed to JD Davis, and I would not have started him. You know, there were things that frustrated me with him when he was a Met, just like all of us. But I don't think it's quite productive just to say, you know, to me, I don't think it's quite productive to say, oh, like he struggled as a Met or there were some bad moments as a Met, just never do it again. You know, I think, you know, if the guy's a fit, he's a fit, you know? And that was my perspective on the whole situation.
I think that the main fear about JD Davis, and we just talk about it's more of just the Mets in general. I think when it comes to somebody like JD Martinez, who they just signed, it's really hard to look at it from the point of just history repeating itself, but history does repeat itself. Mets at this DH position, it's not been good. It's been one of the worst in all of baseball. In terms of teams that have been trying to compete every single year, the Mets have been the worst DH tandem, the worst DH farm, shall we say. We have had about 11 DHs, I'd say. 11 different DHs. All of them have pretty much sucked. Obviously, in that 11, I think I'm counting Travis Blankenhorn getting 2 plate appearances for us, but the point still stands. I think that when you look at what the problem has been, JD Martinez made a lot more sense as compared to the upside of the bat of JD Davis, because JD Martinez, at this current moment, it does not look like he's slowing down. JD Davis, we have seen the very best. We have seen the very worst of him. So it's really hard to make that type of judgment as the one bat that you want protecting Alonso, because I feel like we've gone through that kind of charade of the very, very best, the very, very worst with the Vogelbachs and the Ruffs and the Dom Smiths and even JD Davis at that one point, where, you know, it's just like at one point you're like, okay, let's get one of the best hitters of this generation in JD Martinez already. Let's just do it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this about Vientos. I do think there is a chance he could still break camp with the team. I feel like JD Martinez is probably going to need some at bats, you know, in whatever extended spring ball or whatever they're playing at that time. Even when Martinez gets the call up, I could still see Vientos somehow being a part of this bench. The problem is he's a defensive liability, as we know. And last year, what were we all screaming about? Play the kids, play the kids, play the kids. You know, how is he going to get any better just sitting on the bench 3 or 4 times out of every 5 games? You know, I think there is a way to mix and match Beatty and Vientos at third base, but so far Beatty's had a pretty good spring. I know, as much to your chagrin, Carson, tweeting that today, but he's had the better spring, and I want one of them. I don't care who. I want one of them just to run away and take the job. And so far it's been Beatty. So you don't want to impede.
I'm glad he's proven me wrong. I'm glad he's proven me wrong so far. I mean, there's still a long way to go, but like, he's looked great. He really has looked great. Like, from what I've seen, from what I've wanted to see him do as a hitter, he has done fairly well. There's still a little bit of flaws, but you do have to, at this current moment, the trajectory you're going at.
I mean, we have seen Beatty
less than a week away breaking camp.
We have seen him have stretches of pulling fly balls in the majors, like when he got it first. But you'd rather, like, and obviously didn't continue, but you'd rather see it happen, especially with the adjustments that he vocalized, you know, throughout spring. You'd rather see it happening than not, right? So
I mean, I'd much rather him get the hard contact rolling over to second as compared to lifting the ball to left field, where it pretty much has that hit probability of 0.01%, pretty much. Like, that's how you look at it with flying the ball to left field, because of, you know, just how that is. Like, you can't rely on a dink and dunk like that. So if he's getting that quality of contact, pulling the actual ball, he's going to get those obvious results. But we just need to see more consistency of him. Like, that's pretty much it in general.
Well, I will leave you guys with this. I am hoping and praying, as I do every spring. I am very happy about the Martinez signing, and let's just hope that some of these starting pitchers surprise us. Bullpen holds up, injury-free season, and would love to be back on very soon with the rest of the group.
Yeah.
Let's go Mets.
Muted, Russ. I don't know.
The rotation, the bullpen, let's hope
Pretty
healthy.
much everything. Just everything goes perfectly to plan and nothing goes wrong at all. And the Mets, yeah, they could definitely get 84 wins. Yeah.
It
Sure.
reminds
just
me
roll
of
the
your
dice, get the
viral
snake eyes.
posts
We're
on
okay with
Twitter.
it,
Your viral Mets offseason post. What was it like?
Yeah.
If we stay healthy this year, we're winning 100 games, man.
Yep. If we didn't get hurt last year, we would have totally won 104 games. We would have won the World Series. No doubt. No doubt about it.
Even
All right,
Matt's from
fellas.
Long Island, New York kid. Come on now.
Hey.
I'm
boys.
excited about this top prospect. He's coming up. His name's
right.
Beatty.
All right. Good for you to join us, Tony. It's been,
Thanks,
been
Tony.
a pleasure.
Feelings mutual, boys. Bye-bye.
All right. So as for what has been going on in the chat in terms of our poll of
where did I go?
I think he's still on screen here. Here, I'll do this. Yeah, okay. We're good. Never mind. As for the chat right now, it says 89% of you in our poll right now like this move. So it looks like 89% of you that have voted on this poll don't give a living crap about Vientos. I think that here's how I kind of look at it. It's a trade deadline type of thing, the wait and see type of motto that they have. They're going to address what they need to address at the trade deadline, whether they're competing or not. What I think happens is JD Martinez here on a 1-year deal. Mark Vientos in AAA to start the season. Regarding any injuries to JD Martinez, obviously Mark Vientos will be called up. But if JD Martinez is playing well, the Mets are not winning, they will trade JD Martinez at the deadline. Those gets called up. If the Mets are winning and JD Martinez is playing well, which I think we're almost banking on him being a better DH option compared to all the DH options we've had in the past.
There's no question.
Yeah.
There's no question.
No way.
Like,
Unless the guy pretty much just breaks his neck and back.
Which, like, he is getting up there. But, like, with all due respect to the other options, like, JD Martinez is, like, without a doubt the best DH option, like, the Mets have ever had. That's because, like, DH has only been a thing for a couple of years. But, in the NL.
Of course. So. And here's the thing. If the Mets are competing, JD Martinez is playing well, Mark Vientos gets traded at the deadline. And the Mets trade him possibly for a relief pitcher. Maybe they trade for a depth piece. They trade him for whatever it is. I think that's kind of how you look at it in the current equation. We don't know what happens with Vientos right now. I don't see Vientos getting traded before opening day. I just don't see that happening. I think that not the fact that his value is at the lowest right now, but like he's going on a 25-year-old prospect who's not really done much in the major leagues. Again, they've pretty much deteriorated the asset of Mark Vientos to freaking grinding freaking halt at this point. Finally signing JD Martinez after being attached to him for 6 years. So at this current moment, Vientos probably will start off in AAA. He probably will start off in AAA. I hate that to do that to him, to be honest, because I think that at this current moment, he's earned the right to at least get a try at the major leagues. But now you enter JDM to the equation. That's just kind of how it has to be. It's the business side of baseball that's just heartless.
But dude, like, what for me personally, like, what makes me just more upset about the Vientos aspect is that last year was the perfect opportunity all season to see what we had in him. Like, Vogelback was not giving us production. He wasn't. He was not. And the platoon was not, who was the DH against lefties in the first half? Was it Pham? Like, I don't remember who he was with. Like, Pham was great with us, but like Vogie, like,
think about this.
Was not doing anything. It was the perfect opportunity in my eyes.
The Mets chose give Daniel Vogelbach a mental break over giving Mark Vientos the reins.
They didn't even play him during that mental break. Like, I remember they kept platooning him. Like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to lose my cool, but it's just it just feels like there are the failures of Billy Epler's just reign as GM to me really put us in an awkward spot when it comes to DH. And, I don't know Billy Epler personally. I'm not going to comment to his character. I'm sure there is a personal aspect with a lot of GMs. They make this trade, they trade these assets, and they want to see them play well. But, in my eyes, a great GM, a great president of baseball operations is going to do what's best for the team, by the team, and for the fans. And I do not believe that is what we received last year.
Most of what Epler did was for his personal ego. That's kind of just how I kind of saw it, because the Mets were not winning. They had nothing to lose, but still Daniel Vogelbach was in the fucking lineup every.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I'd say really does piss me off. But it's water under the bridge at this point. It's a sunk what they kind of have with the whole situation. And like I've said before, with the offseason of how it's gone, 1-year deals of lower tier players who can probably give you upside. If you didn't want one like this, you don't hire Billy Epler. It's true. And I've said this before. You don't hire Billy Epler as your GM if you didn't want an aftermath of this. If Stern's coming in and not going after your Soto in a trade and not going after Shohei Ohtani, if you didn't want that, don't hire Billy Epler. That's how I look at it. And of course, was it really Cohen who hired him? Was it Sandy who really hired him? Who knows? At this point, you can't change the past. You just can't. And that's what really does suck about it, because the Mets have wasted a lot of assets and they have done a lot of what if of what they really should have done. But, hindsight's 2020, water under the bridge. It sucks. It really does suck. Because, I do feel bad in terms of Vientos, because I think at his best, he could be a really good major league hitter. And it's not like I'm talking about, I probably, if I didn't like him as a hitter, like in a vacuum, I probably wouldn't be saying it something like that. For me, it's like, okay, if somebody like Joey Wendell was in the same situation, I would say, okay, fuck him. Fuck off. Who cares? But somebody as Vientos, who's a prospect, who has a lot of upside, somebody who has a lot of power in his bat. Near 80 grade power, not Mauricio level, but a lot of power. Let's say 75, 70 in that type of range of grade power.
115 max exit velo last year, I think. In the minors, it's around there too. It was
115. Yeah. So
I'll check his AAA. I'll check his AAA as well.
So, and today he even hit 112 up the middle. So he's steaming it on the ground. But yeah, so I'm looking at the, what is it? Split. I can just bring it up here. For the
113 and AAA 115 against that hitting off Cole last year. So yeah, he has more raw power than JD Martinez, which is not surprising. But Martinez is just really good pitch recognition. His quality contact is just really great. He had a near 600 slugging. Like this is a bat. This is a major addition to the lineup if all goes well. He's aging, but I thought last year he'd be really hitting that aging curve. He actually had his best season in years. So we'll see. I obviously think he's going to be great. You can't bank on it with his age, and that could be another reason to keep Vientos around. We have no backup third baseman. So I think Vientos is going to start the season in AAA, playing third base every day. We'll see what Beatty does. If Vientos is
maybe he'll play first base every single day, because we're going to trade Alonso at the trade deadline. So,
yeah, exactly. Because we have no chance of getting him back, apparently, according to some people. So
yeah, well, obviously,
no.
And listen, I'm looking at since the implementation of the DH, the universal DH, they have had about in minimum 20 plate appearances. The Mets have had 14 different players, either DH. You had Alonso obviously do it. We've had JD Davis. We've had I believe Nimmo did it a few times because he was like injured in 2022 or 2020 or whatever, or no. I don't know. They just like flipped him in and out or something. You've had Yoenis Cespedes, who did absolutely nothing, who basically just bailed on us at the beginning of the season. Dominic Smith did quite time in the DH position. Let's not forget the Robinson Cano comeback. Eduardo Escobar was our DH at one point. Alvarez was called up to be a DH at one point. Jeff McNeil is DH'd. Aaron Ruff, Tommy Pham, and then Mark Vientos. So when you look at all of those guys on that list, rotating in and out and in and out and in and out for the last 3 years, that's insane. JD Martinez on your roster, if he's healthy, if he's got a heartbeat, he's your DH.
Every day.
Every single day. Because he can hit lefties and righties. Who would have figured? There you go. Epler who? Exactly. Vogelbach,
Yeah.
Did I say Vogelbach? I didn't say Vogelbach. But Vogelbach, I think we should have just made the promise that we just don't mention again.
It was some of Vogelbach's at bats last year. Like, were really frustrating to watch. Just frankly, I was not happy. I just wasn't happy watching the Mets next year. I think the lower expectations is going to help. The enjoyment factor, and weirdly, I was excited to see Mark Vientos get a shot, like be the DH, be happy. Like being good is what's going to make you really excited at the end of the day, especially when you're gearing up towards hopefully a stretch of championship contention yearly, which is where we want to be. This is a great signing. I was in favor of it before it happened. I evolved on this front for in the last couple weeks, and it's a move that you can't really avoid doing. Their payroll's so high, like we can't have another. Like, we want to win, right? Yeah. Everyone wants to win, and this team it's a much safer lineup now. So much safer, so much more protection for Alonso. I just feel so much more comfortable. I could just take a deep sigh of relief. It is the best way to put it. This doesn't even necessarily end Mark Vientos's, time as a Met. Martinez could get injured. He's had injury problems.
Of course.
But, finally having a legitimate guy who was on pace for over 40 home runs last year would have had many more home runs if he were a Met last year. This is just it was a match like on a 1-year deal, a cheap 1-year deal. We're paying $4.5 million next year. This was a move we couldn't not make. We just couldn't. And there's tons of other young players that we could have played. I'm just really excited. And I can't wait for the season. I can't believe we're a week away.
Epler and Buck ruined Vientos. Who ruined Beatty? I don't think anybody ruined Beatty. I think Beatty's just always really been like this. Since he was drafted, he's always had this ground ball problem, the hitting profile problem, the small barrel window. He's always had that. But I think that Vientos are of the fault of Epler. I mean, listen, I'm not the biggest fan of Buck Showalter. If you want to win a World Series, you're not going to hire Buck Showalter. It's just not going to happen. But, again, water under the bridge, he's gone. But I think that at this point, if you look at the Mets lineup, you just see a little bit more guaranteed production from more than half of the lineup. And you kind of get over that 5-spot hump where, I still want to, obviously, Pete Alonso needs to be in the top 3 still. But you don't have to put him second in order to be the biggest winning formula known to man. You now have a little bit more flexibility. And that, I think, is, something that the Mets really can... okay, I think you just...
Sorry, guys, my computer's kind of acting.
So yeah, we'll stay on here for about 10 more minutes. We'll answer some questions in the chat. For those of you who have any questions, ask away. But yeah, the Buck curse means we win the World Series the next year. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's been a trend. But the Orioles didn't win it, so
I mean, you never
Very
know
chance we rotate,
what
I guess.
kind of move we make at the deadline. You never know how good
never
we
know.
go in the first. We could surprise everyone. Like if Senga comes back, like even
I mean,
without Senga, like
I mean, I am holding back at the deadline, of course. Holding back for that outfielder in Chicago. And you know who it is.
man, for that guy
Would
to
it
be
be
a Met,
nice? It would
Luis
be nice.
Robert were a Met, man, that would just be beautiful.
You know,
it would be
I am
absolutely
holding on
beautiful.
to it. But again, a lot has to fall. The dominoes have to fall perfectly for that to happen.
Yeah, but I also feel like there's going to be prospects who ultimately don't make the long-term team. Like Acuna and Jett are going to have to fight against each other.
And you
I
also have the uncertainty
think.
of Marte. Let's not forget that. Bader's on a 1-year deal. So it does fit. I think it does fit. And, you know, does that make you a contender if you are already contending at the trade deadline? Sure. But, like, we need a Montgomery-like pitcher. I think the rotation for now, it's gonna survive to the deadline. I think that's what they're going to do. I don't see them getting any more pitching. But, you know, it's David Stearns. You never know. You never know. So,
And Christian Scott's going to be that. Like I like we obviously like
guy.
It's a lazy argument. It can be to say, oh, our trade deadline acquisitions, this prospect or this player returning from injury. But you know, I truly do think Christian Scott is going to be an impact starter for us this year if he gets the call. So I'm not sure. I would like to think the Mets get some Scott before the trade deadline. I think that'd be a very smart thing to do. And look, even the rotation without Senga, I'm not going to act like it's great. You know, it's not a perfect rotation. I think it's enough to hold up till Senga gets back. Quintana's solid. Severino, I think, is going to pitch well when he's on the field. Manaya's solid. I believe he's solid. Hauser is like an average starter, and there's nothing having as many average starters in your rotation is a good thing. Look, the Rangers last year, the Rangers had so many just mediocre average pitchers in the rotation, highlighted by Montgomery, who, in my opinion, is not as good as Senga when he comes back. I think the Mets could, like, I'm not saying we're going to win. If the Mets did get to the World Series, theoretically, I feel like they have a rotation that could give them enough innings, quality innings, maybe not blow by like DeGrom type 100-mile-an-hour stuff, like just completely obliterating the batters.
How I look at it from top to bottom, from the rotation and the bullpen, how I look at it is, and we'll get to this question in a second from Giovanni, but if you look at the point from, I don't know, from the top of the rotation to the back end of the bullpen, they're in a situation where they have the depth and they have tons of quantity here where anybody can mop up anybody. If somebody does struggle in a decent stretch, you know, at one point, you know, David Stearns has talked about it where they're trying to see trends before they happen. And when they're trying to mix and match things and project things a better way. And I think that that's kind of something that has really been displayed on with the offseason he's had. But let's say Hauser does struggle and he's pretty much unplayable or unpitchable. 5 straight starts with where he is getting blown up. Jose Budo's out there. You know, Joey Lucchese's a possibility. Then Chris Scott is there. So there is a situation in the rotation and the bullpen where anybody can mop up anybody to make up for the innings that you're going to be missing with Senga first month or two. And I think that that's something that is really important to the Mets pitching staff because quantity can beat the quality down the stretch. Of course, when it comes to the end, you need Senga healthy for the playoffs. You need Senga. But it's a 162-game season. Things are going to go wrong. Windows are going, it's a huge window for failure. It's a huge window for success. 162 games. You don't see a team going out there every single year basically poised to go 162 and up. Have everything perfect go their way. It's just not going to happen.
Also,
so
if I could just with Luis Severino is an unbelievable X factor for this rotation. If Luis Severino looks like pitches like he has been in spring training. This is an if, obviously. You know, I don't take spring training at face value. I care about the stuff. I obviously care about, you know, the health. You know, the results are a different question, but, you know, I have made it vocal that I think Severino is going to be a fairly good run preventer when he's on the field. If Severino stays healthy and he's the pitcher that I expect him to be when he is healthy, the Mets rotation immediately much scarier, much better suited for postseason run, much better suited for playoff run. A top two of Senga and Severino, that is a dangerous 1-2 punch if a lot of things go right. And if you add in Christian Scott at any point, if he can command the ball like he has been, if he could throw that disgusting fastball like he has been, that disgusting sweeper, you have a top three that would invoke fear to me, to an opposing team. And that is very underrated.
And that's not even including a rare instance, like a top 5% rare instance of Sean Manaea, who's a strikeout lefty. So, I mean, the strikeouts are your best defense, of course, but if you have defense out there, you know, the run prevention that has really been emphasized this offseason, you know, you're going to have the tools to succeed, to win in the margins, with the upside of winning in the margins to the trade deadline. And then you're like, okay, well, now we've got Steve Cohen's money. Let's deal some shit out. Let's go win a World Series. If you're in that position, of course. I think that there is, going into 2025, if the vision is 2025 to compete for a World Series, you can't lose any other way. There's just no way the Mets can lose. Mets win no matter what. They can trade prospects at the deadline if they are competing. They can trade these one-year contracts for prospects to make it even bigger and maybe possibly go for a bigger trade, such as Luis Robert, who we just talked about, or Robert, or whatever. But who we just talked about, you can bring up those bring a more conglomerate of prospects and kind of trade that for Luis Robert. You know, that's obviously thinking, but there's so many. They're in such a pivotal spot where they can't lose. They just can't lose in terms of 2025. And that's what I really like about that. Now, Giovanni did ask this question. He's been waiting a little bit patiently in the chat. Are we counting on Mauricio to return this year at any point? I'm going to go with a big no. Mainly because, you know, obviously we did talk about this a little bit on the podcast. The Ronald Acuna situation is a little bit similar, obviously, because nobody's saying that they are the same player. They aren't. Ronald Acuna is arguably, right now, maybe the best player in baseball. And when you look at it with Mauricio, it's hard to get back to your full form. And for somebody like Ronnie Mauricio, who we haven't seen his full form yet, it's going to take a while for him. And I would not rush him back. I would much rather, if you are a third baseman away from contending at the trade deadline, and again, lots of things have to go right. Let's say Beatty and Vientos both have been terrible. I'd much rather trade for a third baseman than have Mauricio come up here and be rushed through his injury, because he deserves the perfect slate shot, a clean slate, in my opinion. I think he's earned that right. And I'm not trying to throw him into the fire in late September. And it's just, I don't know.
You know what? I think if Mauricio didn't get hurt, I think Jeff McNeil's potentially not on this team right now. What do you think about that?
Maybe. Okay, so long time fan. Your mic is always low. Yeah, I always have mic settings that are ridiculous. I have to figure it out eventually, and I will. But I'll dial this thing up a little bit. Let me know if that's a little bit louder. But yeah, I've had some people say my mic sounds fine. Some say it sounds like shit. Last podcast, I had some audio issues with that, even with some of our other audio as well. And that'll be figured out, obviously. But yeah, back to Mauricio, of course. There is a possibility there because of maybe there's Jet Williams, there's Luis Angel Acuna possibly pushing him out. And And I think that's obviously something, breathing down his neck, whether I'm not, high on Jet Williams or Luisano Acuna or not. The younger does stretch out a lot better as compared to somebody like Jeff McNeil. And I do think that if the Mets aren't competing, he's going to be one of the first ones out of here. I do believe that because the contract is movable.
He's a good player.
But
like objectively, he's a good player. Like he's a solid player.
Yeah, I think he is going to be one of the guys who are considered to be moved out. Obviously, Bader would be another one that they possibly trade, or
Severino, Martinez.
Severino, yeah.
Can I just put this out into the world? You might not want to hear it. Alonso.
Yeah.
Could be Alonso.
It could be. It could be. And listen, I think that the Mets are kind of somewhat in terms of financial, even though financial doesn't really matter. The Mets, maybe they're somewhat fucking themselves giving him protection, but right here with JD Martinez, but because there's a strong possibility that with JD Martinez at the very best, installing fear into a pitcher, no matter what, if he's hitting behind him, because JD Martinez has given that off his entire career. He's one of the best hitters of this generation. And, there is a strong possibility that this guy contends for 60 home runs. And he makes it even more difficult for the Mets in the free agent market, represented by Scott Boras. There's a strong possibility that does happen. So they are kind of fucking themselves a little bit. But again, you also look at it from that angle of Pete Alonso, where this is your last guaranteed year with him. So it's either you go out with a bang or you just leave him floating with a Daniel Vogelbach type of bat behind him once again. And you just don't want that, in my opinion.
If Pete hits 60 homers, I think he's not coming back. Like, especially with a team like the Cubs who love Alonso, like you've been trying to get him since the last deadline. I think the Cubs are going to be a really big threat for Alonso, and an underrated team. I think Tampa Bay is going to make a play at him. Especially if they get off the Franco contract. Like they made a big play for Freddie Freeman, who was a lot older than Pete. And I don't know exactly where it is, but I have heard that the Rays love Pete Alonso. He'd also be like kind of a hometown guy.
Yeah.
He's also like Pete Alonso is such a great hitter, and everyone knows that. There is no replacement for Pete long term.
There isn't.
Yeah. Like you could say Clifford, but like that's a prospect. I'm not plugging a prospect over a guy who's guaranteed to give you 40 homers a year. You can't do that in my eyes. Pete Alonso, if Matt Olson were a free agent, then okay, that's a different story.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this so many times. Give me the Matt Olson, give me the Freddie Freeman if you want to replace Alonso, but they're not out there. They're not available. So
they're not out there.
They're just not. I mean, they can't lose a guy like Pete Alonso, even with JD Martinez in this lineup, because he ain't going to be here forever. He's 37 years old. I mean, he's probably not going to be here next year. So,
no, he won't.
Yeah,
he won't.
That's kind of how I envision it. But it all will be discussed as on the free agent market with Scott Boras at the helm. I mean, that's kind of what we saw from the beginning. He hired Boras. He's going to free agency. It's going to happen. Like that. Yeah. That's what happens with his clients, no matter what, if he stays with them or not. What do you think is the next for the Mets to sign? I don't think there's anything out there that they're going to do. Is there a possibility they make like a minor trade, maybe for like roster flexibility or something, like get somebody off to add somebody back in? Maybe. I am curious to see what happens on this roster right now. Who gets taken off the 40-man with adding JD Martinez. Unless they want JD Martinez to fight for the DH position. But, I don't know. I think they're pretty much set now. I think that squeezing the last juice of the Mets offseason was JD Martinez, was maybe another pitching move, and they did it. It took a long time for that to happen. It floated around Jon Heyman's office forever, but it finally happened, and now they don't have to worry about it. And they did it. they freaking did it.
Yeah, this is a great signing. I'm just relieved. I don't have to. There's so many possible concerns have been answered. If Vientos and Beatty both did not perform the way we wanted them to, then our path to the playoffs, which is the goal, is very difficult to see, especially with all the volatility and the rotation that could potentially take place. Just with the amount of injury that we can anticipate there. JD Martinez, man, he's gonna hit for power. He's gonna give us 30 plus homers if he's healthy.
I just
he's
think
gonna
that
be
this
productive
situation has
too.
so much flexibility to it. I really just think it really does, because not just in terms of the payroll, not just in terms of I mean, you're giving this guy $4.5 million after the season he just had.
Yeah.
I mean, $4.5 million this year after the season he just, and maybe it's I don't know, $9 million with the luxury tax or whatever. Then you defer the payments to 2034, which that's not a real year. Let's be real. That's not a real year. That's a decade from now. Who gives a shit, right?
But can I just say something about that, though? The fact that Scott Boras deferred a contract, I did not expect him to do that.
Yeah,
he is in his 70s.
I mean, I didn't expect them to get JD Martinez in general. So
this could mean a lot for Soto's sweepstakes next year, which was one of my first thoughts when I heard about the deferments. Because, Boras is in his 70s. If Soto is willing to take
he's going senile at the right point.
No, but seriously, man, I did not know that. I did not expect Boras to be into especially for 1.5 million yearly in 10 years. He'll be in his 80s. Can you believe that?
That's
feels like Boras has just always been here, and now he's getting old. I'm not suggesting anything, obviously, of course not, but I'm just saying he's been here for a while.
Behind the scenes, he was super loud last week. Yeah, and nobody told me. Yeah, thanks. What good co-host you are. Okay. But Pete Alonso is the best true power hitter in the MLB that isn't 6'7". Who are you referring to?
Judge.
You sure? Are you sure Daniel Vogelbach's not 6'7" and we're just missing it? Next year,
Jet
Mauricio, Vientos, and 15 others will compete for the third base spot. I hope it's not that many, because I think that'll probably, that'll probably bottle up a lot of the roster space. But listen, Colin Houck is my third baseman. Let's just say that in 2028. Could Paul Goldschmidt or Anthony Rizzo or Joey Gallo replace Alonso in case we don't get him? No. I don't see that happening.
Against that. Yeah.
No.
Goldschmidt is getting
maybe Rizzo 5 years ago. Maybe Joey Gallo with the juice balls. Maybe Paul Goldschmidt 5 years ago. Maybe. But, yeah, you're not replacing Pete, especially in the current position they are in, whether they think they have power internally or not. It's just not going to happen. All right, we're going to answer one more question. So the first question that pops up in the chat, we'll answer that question, and then we'll head out of here. But for those of you who don't know, it's on the screen in case you're blind or anything. The Mets have signed JD Martinez to a 1-year, $12 million contract. Technically, it is going to be $4.5 million this year, deferred from 2034 to 2038. Again, not a real year, so who cares? Just to kind of bring down the luxury tax and kind of still put them in the position of the draft slot or whatever, I believe. Did I say June? Should have had. Didn't you say the Mets shouldn't have? What happened?
I think you meant JD Martinez. Did you say?
JD
Didn't
Martinez?
you say that? I think you said no. You didn't. You tweeted. You tweeted.
Oh yeah, I did tweet this. I tweeted yesterday. I said, "Do you actually think that JD Martinez is going to be a Met after being attached to him for 6 to 7 years, the last 6 to 7 years?" And basically, I just got so frustrated. I was like, okay, maybe at what point will Mets fans start to basically dox Heyman to get him to stop doing this? Because it was literally every single week we were getting news. Mets are still in on JD Martinez. The Mets are close to a deal with JD Martinez. They have talked to JD Martinez. They are interested in JD Martinez. I mean, this just kept on going over and over and over again. The next day, they fucking sign him. So you're welcome, I guess, for the jinx I just gave to you guys, but it's a good jinx. So it's better than the alternative where, let's just say, I feel good about a player and then they get completely blown up. How many wins does JD add to this team now? I think that's the question we will go off on. Let's see.
I think personally, you can see on the screen, the 2.2 WAR in 13 games. But also there's an aspect, like I unfortunately, I do think there is kind of a realistic shot that Vientos would have, there was a chance he could have been a negative WAR player. Like that was not out of the realm of possibility.
Of
so, I hope, like on the wins above replacement, scale, which wins above replacement is a great stat to try to find as much player value
to try
as
and
possible.
Project. Yeah.
But like, especially like with relievers, like a guy like Edwin Diaz, like he, in my opinion, I think he had to have contributed more than 3 wins in 2022 than if we had an average reliever. So from that standpoint, he could add a couple wins for sure. I expect him to. I think the Mets. I would put the Mets maybe around 84-ish wins after this signing, maybe 85. We have a shot at the playoffs, that's for sure. The NL's been getting a bit better. I think we stack up really well against, it's going to be us, San Diego, and San Francisco for that final spot, probably most likely. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we finish in second behind Atlanta. Like I as much as like I'm not predicting this to happen per se, but I can see the Phillies kind of having a worse year than last year because Wheeler lost a tick. Wheeler's incredible, but that being said, he lost a tick of velocity. He's getting much older, like pretty quickly. I don't expect Castellanos to play as well as he did last year, respectfully. You don't know what Nola's going to do. I love Nola, but like he has been inconsistent. There's just a lot of questions with that Phillies team to me. Taijuan Walker hasn't looked great. Ranger Suarez, I do expect the Phillies to have a better record than us, but I think the Mets definitely can get in the race.
Yeah. In terms of my projections, because obviously we did the 30 projections in 30 days, which is wrapping up this week. For those of you who don't know, with my projections totally offensively, because obviously JD Martinez, offensive player, I had them as a total in position players 22.4 total WAR. Now that would have put them as the 12th best team in baseball last year.
So what was that you said?
Offensively, shall we say?
12th?
That would put them in 12th behind Baltimore and just ahead of Philadelphia.
With Vientos as the everyday DH.
Yes, roughly. Vientos as the everyday DH. Now, if you have JD Martinez, let's say you add that 2.2, just roughly. You're adding 2.2 to that, so that's like what, 24.6? That would put them 10th. So that puts you pretty much around the last wild card spot, roughly. Again, that's just them offensively. And then the pitching, which I think is going to outperform a lot of expectations, especially under David Stearns, of course.
I agree.
I had them at 15.5 total. Let me see where that would put them. That would be 13th.
There's going to be quite a bit of homers in this lineup too. I feel like, which is so great, especially if we do get into the postseason. That's going to be amazing if we're healthy.
I think when you add JD Martinez the typical way, I think that you are adding more homers to this lineup than JD Davis, Dominic Smith, Daniel Vogelbach, and Darren Ruff all combined to this lineup. That's how big of an upgrade this is. That's how I see it.
It's an actual DH. This is an actual DH.
It's not a let's create a DH. This guy could be a DH at his ceiling. This is an actual DH. He's proven it his entire career.
Yeah, and there's no disrespect if we did go the Vientos route, if the money didn't add up, if we really did believe in him. This is an actual DH in a season where the Mets clearly we want to make the playoffs, and we will be disappointed if that doesn't happen. And this adds so much line of protection to Pete. It does more than just add another bat. It will affect the other bats too. So this is a fantastic deal. I just saw a tweet, I think from Puma, $9 million in total, including luxury taxes, $4.5 million this year. So $9 million is going to be added with all the deferments. This is a great deal. Like
the biggest benefit, and I'll end on this, and then we'll head out of here. Biggest benefit of how I see it, it's more pitches for Pete Alonso to hit out of the park. That's how I look at it, because since he came into this league, he has the third lowest percentage of pitches in the zone, I believe. I think it's third or fourth, something like that. It's ridiculous. And yet he still leads the league in home runs since his debut, which is insane. But when you look at it now, it gives you the opportunity to maybe see something special from Pete Alonso that you didn't get to see with freaking Burger Boy protecting him, or Steve from Minecraft protecting him, or Dom protecting him, or I don't even know at this point.
Yeah,
Beatty Vientos third base platoon. Yeah, I don't see that happening.
I don't see that.
I don't think either of them can really succeed from that. But other than that, I think we're going to hop off here. We've been live for about, I'd say, almost 100 minutes, shall we say. But one more time, the Mets have signed JD Martinez to a 1-year, $12 million contract. And let's just say we're happy. We're just happy. We've got some protection here. But other than that, make sure to hit the thumbs up if you have not already. Subscribe. Turn on post notifications for the premiere of our podcast every single Tuesday at 4 Eastern time, which I'm sure Road will be on this week as well. And you guys let us know. Again, if you want him as a permanent host, we will make that happen. And also, 30 projections in 30 days. We have that going throughout the rest of the week. Obviously, it mixes up a little bit with JD Martinez back in the mix, but most of it does hold up fairly well. But other than that, we'll see you guys next time. Hopefully this is the last piece of off-season news, shall we say. We can go into the season. And we're winding down from spring training into the regular season. And obviously there's excitement. There's expectation around. The season is young. Everybody starts at 0-0. So we'll see you guys next time. Let's go Mets. Peace out. All right.
LFGM.
Yay. LFGM.